Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the strange blue planet grow larger on the main screen. After 3 months of travel through deep space, they had finally reached the homeworld of the beings who called themselves the Zephyrian Collective. It was the year 2387, and this was humanity's first contact with an alien civilization. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Lieutenant Carol Phillips from the communications station. Her voice carried excitement mixed with nervousness. Everyone on the bridge felt the same way. This moment would change everything for the human race. The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at a tall, elegant creature with blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water. Its eyes were large and silver, and crystalline formations grew from its forehead and shoulders. When it spoke, the words came through the translation device they had built based on the mathematical signals the aliens had sent to Earth. "Welcome, travelers from the world you call Earth," the being said. Its voice was melodic, almost musical. "I am High Ambassador Zethric of the Zephyrian Collective. We have waited long to meet your kind." Jake took a deep breath and stepped forward. He had trained for this moment for years, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of speaking to an alien intelligence. "Thank you for your welcome, Ambassador. I am Captain Jake Morrison, representing the United Earth Government. We come in peace, hoping to learn and to share knowledge." The alien's face moved in what might have been a smile. "Peace is what we offer as well, Captain Morrison. Your species intrigues us. In such a short time, you have spread across 12 star systems, most remarkable for such a young civilization." Over the next several hours, Jake and his crew were invited aboard the Zephyrian vessel. It was massive, easily 10 times the size of any human ship. The corridors were filled with soft blue light, and the walls seemed to pulse gently, as if the ship itself was alive. Zethric led them through halls filled with other Zephyrians, all tall and graceful, all watching the humans with those large, silver eyes. "Our society values harmony and knowledge," Zethric explained as they walked. "We explore the galaxy not to conquer, but to understand. When we discovered your signals, we knew we had found kindred spirits." Jake felt his tension ease. These beings seemed genuinely peaceful. Back on Earth, some people had feared that first contact would mean invasion or war. But the Zephyrians appeared to be everything humanity had hoped for in alien neighbors. The formal meeting took place in a vast chamber filled with soft music and gentle lights. Commander Lisa Stone, Earth's chief diplomatic representative, had arrived on a separate ship just hours before. She was a skilled negotiator who had helped settle disputes between Earth's colonies. Now she faced her greatest challenge. "We propose a simple arrangement," Zethric said, his crystalline features catching the light. "A sharing of knowledge and culture. We can offer you advances in energy production, faster travel between stars, and medical knowledge that could extend human life by centuries." Lisa leaned forward, interested but careful. "And what would you want in return?" "Access to your colonies for our researchers," Zethric replied smoothly. "Your species has a unique way of solving problems. We would like to study your methods, your thinking patterns. Purely for academic purposes, of course." The negotiations continued for days. Jake found himself genuinely liking many of the Zephyrians he met. They seemed curious about human culture, asking endless questions about Earth's history, art, and science. They shared their own stories of exploring distant galaxies and meeting other species across the cosmos. Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Clark worked at the human research station called New Frontier, orbiting a planet in the Centauri system. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms. Even though the Zephyrians claimed to be peaceful, Amy kept careful watch on the energy. Readings around human colonies. Something bothered her about the patterns she was seeing. There were strange energy signatures appearing near human settlements, always when Zephyrian ships were in the area. The signatures were subtle, barely detectable, but they were there. Amy had spent years studying alien technologies, and these readings didn't match anything the Zephyrians had openly shared. She sent a message to her colleague, Dr. Nina Ford, who was working on Europa. "Nina, I'm seeing some unusual energy patterns around our colonies. Have you noticed anything strange in your area?" Nina's response came back quickly. "Actually, yes. There have been some odd readings here too, almost like deep scans, but much more detailed than anything we've seen before. What do you think they're looking for?" Amy stared at her data for hours, running analysis after analysis. The energy signatures were consistent with biological scanning technology, but far more advanced than anything humans possessed. It was as if the Zephyrians were taking detailed samples of human DNA and biological processes. But why would they need such detailed biological information if they were just interested in cultural exchange? Back on the Zephyrian homeworld, the negotiations concluded successfully. Commander Lisa Stone signed a formal alliance agreement, and both species celebrated what appeared to be the beginning of a beautiful friendship. The Zephyrians offered to establish research stations near human colonies, and humans would be welcome to visit Zephyrian worlds. As the human ships prepared to leave, Zethric approached Jake privately. "Captain, your species is truly remarkable. We have met many civilizations in our travels, but none quite like humanity." "We're honored by your friendship," Jake replied, shaking the alien's cool, smooth hand. "Friendship," Zethric repeated, his silver eyes reflecting Jake's image. "Yes, that is what this is." Jake left feeling hopeful about the future. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, and they had found allies who seemed to genuinely care about peace and knowledge. But light years away, Amy Clark continued to monitor the strange energy signatures. They were getting stronger and more frequent. Whatever the Zephyrians were really doing near human colonies, it wasn't simple cultural research. She decided to investigate further, not knowing that her curiosity might be the only thing standing between humanity and complete destruction. The Zephyrians had plans for the human race, plans that had nothing to do with friendship or cultural exchange. As Jake's ship jumped into hyperspace, heading back toward Earth with news of the successful first contact, hidden Zephyrian vessels began moving toward human colonies throughout the galaxy. The real purpose of their mission was about to begin. 6 months had passed since the historic first contact with the Zephyrian collective. The human colonies were buzzing with excitement about their new alien allies. Trade agreements were being finalized, and several Zephyrian research stations had been established near major human settlements. Everything seemed perfect. Then the colonies began to die. It started on New Haven, a farming world with nearly 80,000 residents. The planetary communications system sent out a routine daily report on Monday morning. By Wednesday, there was only silence. Captain Ryan Bell of the patrol ship Liberty received the emergency call to investigate. He was a veteran officer who had served in the Outer Rim conflicts, but nothing had prepared him for what he found when his ship entered New Haven's orbit. "Sir, I'm not picking up any life signs from the surface," reported Ensign Bobby Kim from the sensor station. His young face was pale as he studied the readings. "The cities are all intact, but there's no movement, no energy signatures that would indicate living people." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. "Take us down to the capital city. Full biohazard protocols." The landing party wore sealed environmental suits as they walked through the empty streets of Haven City. Cars sat abandoned in the middle of roads. Shop doors hung open. Children's toys lay scattered in playgrounds where no children would ever play again. Dr. Lisa Park, the ship's medical officer, knelt beside one of the bodies they found in a local school. The man looked peaceful, as if he had simply laid down to sleep and never woken up. "No obvious signs of trauma," she reported. "No wounds, no burns, nothing to suggest violence." They found bodies everywhere, in homes, in offices, in the fields, outside the city. Entire families had died together. The livestock were dead too, but strangely, the local wildlife seemed unaffected. Birds still flew through the trees, and small animals scurried through the abandoned streets. "It's like something targeted only the humans and their domestic animals," Dr. Park said, her voice muffled by the suit's communication system, "but left everything else alive." Ryan collected samples and ordered an immediate departure. Something had killed 80,000 people in just a few days, and they needed to find out what before it spread to other colonies. But it was already too late. Reports began flooding in from across human space. Terra Beta, a mining world with 45,000 residents, had gone silent. New Eden, a beautiful garden world that housed 50,000 colonists, sent out a desperate message about a strange plague before their communications cut off forever. One by one, the human colonies were dying. On Earth, President John Hayes called an emergency session of the Colonial Council. The massive conference room was filled with military officers, scientists, and government officials, all trying to understand what was happening to their people. "In the past 2 weeks, we've lost contact with 8 colonies," reported Admiral Paul Scott, head of the Colonial Navy. His weathered face showed the strain of the crisis. "That's over 400,000 people, Mr. President. And the pattern is always the same. Normal communications, then reports of illness, then silence." Dr. Susan Wright, Earth's leading expert on alien diseases, stood to address the room. "I've analyzed the samples Captain Bell brought back from New Haven. The pathogen is unlike anything we've ever seen. It appears to be engineered specifically to target human DNA." A murmur of fear ran through the room. President Hayes raised his hand for silence. "Are you saying this is a biological weapon?" "I'm saying it's impossible for this to be natural," Dr. Wright replied grimly. "The virus has been designed to kill humans and only humans. It's precise, efficient, and deadly. Whoever created this knows our biology better than we do." Lieutenant Colonel Kate Murphy, head of Colonial Intelligence, stood up slowly. She was a tough woman who had spent years fighting space pirates and terrorist groups, but her usual confidence was shaken. "Mr. President, I need to report something," she said. 3 days ago, we detected unusual activity in the asteroid belt, near Colony Sector 7. Our long-range scouts found what appears to be a hidden facility." The room fell silent. Kate activated the main display, showing blurry images of a massive structure built into a large asteroid. "The energy signatures match Zephyrian technology. We believe they've been operating secret bases throughout our territory." President Hayes felt the blood drain from his face. Are you suggesting that our new allies are responsible for this genocide? Sir, the evidence is overwhelming, Kate replied. The biological weapon is based on technology far beyond our current capabilities. The hidden bases appear to be manufacturing and distribution centers, and the timing matches perfectly with the establishment of their research stations near our colonies. Admiral Scott slammed his fist on the table. Those blue-skinned bastards have been studying us, learning our weaknesses, and then using that knowledge to wipe us out. Dr. Wright pulled up another display showing the spread of the plague. If this pattern continues, we'll lose all our outer colonies within the next month, and then they'll move on the inner systems, including Earth. The president stood, his face hard with determination. Colonel Murphy, I want every available ship searching for these hidden bases. Admiral Scott, prepare our defenses. And Dr. Wright, you need to find a cure or treatment for this weapon. Sir, Kate said quietly, there's something else. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected massive fleet movements in Zephyrian space. They're mobilizing what appears to be a full-scale invasion force. As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the building. A young communications officer burst into the room, his face white with terror. Mr. President, we're receiving reports from our outer defense stations. Zephyrian fleets are dropping out of hyperspace all across the frontier. They're beginning orbital bombardments of our remaining colonies. Through the windows of the conference room, they could see the first signs of panic in the streets below. News of the attacks was spreading quickly, and people were starting to realize that humanity was under assault by the very aliens they had welcomed as friends. Admiral Scott was already moving toward the door. I'm ordering all available ships to defensive positions. But, sir, we're outnumbered at least 10 to 1. Their technology is more advanced than ours. And now we know they've been planning this attack for months. President Hayes looked around the room at the faces of humanity's leaders. They had been betrayed in the cruelest possible way. The Zephyrians had used humanity's own openness and trust against them. Then we fight, he said simply. We fight for every world, every ship, every life. We may not win, but we'll make them pay for every human they've killed. As the leaders rushed to coordinate humanity's desperate defense, none of them could imagine that this moment of seeming defeat would become the beginning of something far more terrible than the Zephyrians could possibly understand. They had awakened something in humanity that would eventually make them regret ever hearing the name of Earth. The Zephyrian fleet appeared over Earth like a dark cloud blocking out the sun. Hundreds of massive ships hung in space, their blue hulls gleaming as they prepared to deliver the final blow to humanity's home world. Admiral Paul Scott stood on the bridge of the Defiance, humanity's most powerful warship, watching the alien fleet through the main screen. Around him, the remnants of Earth's navy prepared for a battle they could not win. In the past 3 months, humanity's population had collapsed from 2.8 billion across the colonies to less than 100 million survivors scattered across hidden bases and remote outposts. Sir, they're powering up their weapons, reported Commander Alex Turner from the tactical station. He was young for his rank, promoted quickly as so many senior officers had died in the opening battles. Energy readings are off the charts. Paul nodded grimly. They had fought desperately to defend each colony, but the Zephyrians were simply too powerful. Their weapons could burn cities from orbit, and their biological weapons had swept through human settlements like wildfire. Now Earth itself was about to fall. All ships, this is Admiral Scott, he said into the communications system. We knew this day would come. We're not going to win this fight, but we're going to show these aliens what humans are made of. Make every shot count. The battle began with a flash of light that could be seen from the surface. Human missiles and energy beams lanced out toward the alien fleet, scoring hits on several ships. But for every Zephyrian vessel they damaged, 10 more returned fire. The human fleet was simply overwhelmed. On the surface, Dr. Susan Wright worked, frantically in her laboratory beneath the Rocky Mountains. She had been trying to develop a cure for the Zephyrian biological weapon, but time was running out. Around her, technicians loaded genetic samples and research data into transport containers. "Doctor, we have to go," urged Captain Carl Davis, the officer assigned to evacuate the most critical personnel. "The transports are ready to launch for the lunar bases." Susan looked at her work, years of research that might hold the key to humanity's survival. "Just 5 more minutes. I think I'm close to understanding how their weapon works." An explosion shook the facility as Zephyrian bombardment began striking the surface. Dust fell from the ceiling and the lights flickered. Carl grabbed Susan's arm firmly but gently. "Doctor, if you die here, all your knowledge dies with you. We need you alive." Reluctantly, Susan gathered her most important data and followed Carl to the evacuation transports. As their ship lifted off from the hidden launch bay, she watched through the window as beam after beam of blue energy struck the Earth's surface. Major cities were burning. The planet that had given birth to humanity was dying. Lieutenant Alex Turner's ship, the Perseverance, was one of the few vessels to escape the battle around Earth. His crew of 30 had become refugees, joining other survivors fleeing to the outer reaches of the solar system. They established a hidden base in the asteroid belt, using the cover of floating rocks to avoid detection. "How many others made it out?" asked Ensign Nina Ford, the ship's science officer. She was brilliant but young, barely 25 years old. The war had aged them all. Alex checked the communication logs. "Maybe a dozen ships total. A few thousand people at most. That's all that's left of Earth's military." The survivors weren't just military personnel. Dr. Nina Ford managed to evacuate a secret research facility on Europa before the Zephyrians found it. She took with her genetic samples from thousands of species, including extensive human genetic data that might prove crucial for the future. Her team of scientists worked in cramped conditions under the ice, trying to understand how humanity could fight back. Captain Carl Davis commanded a small fleet of cargo ships and civilian vessels that had escaped the destruction. They moved constantly through the outer rim, never staying in one place long enough for the Zephyrians to track them. His ships carried not just people, but the knowledge and culture that remained of human civilization. "We're not just survivors," Carl told his captains during one of their secret meetings. "We're the seed of humanity's future. Someday, somehow, we're going to make them pay for what they've done." But revenge seemed impossible. The Zephyrians had achieved their goal with terrifying efficiency. They began colonizing former human worlds. Immediately, their own people moving into the cities and farms that humans had built with their blood and sweat. They treated the extermination of humanity like a simple business transaction. Major Sam King had been stationed on Mars when the war began. He managed to evacuate most of his personnel to hidden bunkers in the planet's industrial complexes before Zephyrian forces arrived. From underground, he watched through concealed cameras as alien soldiers walked through human settlements, cataloging everything of value. "They're not even angry," he reported to the other survivors during a secret communication session. "They're just efficient, like they're cleaning up after an insect infestation." Engineer Beth Cross worked with Sam to salvage what they could from the Mars industrial facilities. She was a genius with technology, able to make broken equipment work with spare parts and creativity. Together, they began developing new weapons and tools from salvaged alien technology left behind by careless Zephyrian soldiers. The survivors slowly began to realize that they weren't completely alone. Intercepted Zephyrian communications revealed that other species had suffered similar fates. The Corvani had been wiped out 50 years ago. The Altarians had been extinct for a century. The Nexari had simply vanished one day, their entire civilization erased. "They're not explorers," Dr. Susan Wright concluded during one of the rare gatherings of surviving leaders. "They're exterminators. They move through the galaxy, identifying species that might become threats, and then they eliminate them before they can develop." Lieutenant Colonel Kate Murphy, operating from a hidden base on Pluto, had managed to capture some Zephyrian communication equipment. Through careful analysis, she discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about their enemies. "They're running," she announced during an encrypted conference call. "The Zephyrians aren't native to this galaxy. They're refugees from something in the galactic core. Something so terrible that they've been fleeing for thousands of years, destroying other civilizations to prevent them from becoming powerful enough to threaten Zephyrian security." This revelation gave the survivors a new understanding of their enemy. The Zephyrians weren't conquerors seeking glory or resources. They were cowards, so afraid of potential threats that they committed genocide to feel safe. As the first year of the Hidden War began, humanity's survivors started to change. Living in cramped bunkers, breathing recycled air, watching their species die, they began to develop a hardness that their peaceful ancestors had never possessed. Children born in the hidden bases grew up learning that life was a constant struggle for survival. Dr. Nina Ford made the first breakthrough in genetic adaptation, developing treatments that allowed humans to survive in environments that would have killed their ancestors. Major Sam King's engineers created weapons that could punch through Zephyrian armor. Captain Carl Davis established trade networks with other survivor groups, creating a hidden economy based on salvage and revenge. The Zephyrians believed they had won a complete victory. They had no idea that in trying to exterminate humanity, they had given birth to something far more dangerous than the peaceful explorers they had destroyed. The survivors weren't just planning to rebuild their civilization. They were planning to become something the galaxy had never seen before. 20 years had passed since the Great Dying, and humanity's survivors had learned to live like ghosts in their own galaxy. Hidden bases scattered across dead worlds and empty asteroids housed the remnants of human civilization. What had started as desperate refugees had slowly transformed into something the Zephyrians could never have imagined. Major Sam King stood in the command center of Base Olympus, built deep within the ruins of the Mars Industrial Complex. Around him, screens displayed information from dozens of hidden outposts across human space. He was no longer the young officer who had watched his world burn. 20 years of guerrilla warfare had turned him into something harder, more focused. "Report from the Vega raid," announced Captain Lisa Park, his intelligence officer. She had been Dr. Lisa Park back when she worked on medical ships. Now she coordinated attacks against Zephyrian supply lines. Teams Alpha and Beta successfully destroyed 3 cargo vessels and captured their technical databases. Sam nodded, studying the tactical display. The raids were getting more ambitious and more successful. Human survivors had learned to strike fast and disappear before Zephyrian reinforcements could arrive. They had become experts at living in the shadows between the stars. Engineer Beth Cross approached the command table, carrying a device that hummed with alien energy. She had spent 2 decades studying captured Zephyrian technology, learning to adapt their tools for human use. Her workshop had become the heart of humanity's technological renaissance. "The new stealth generators are ready for field testing," she reported. "We can make a ship completely invisible to their sensors for up to 6 hours. That should be enough time to hit their research station in the Proxima system." The research station was a high-priority target. Intelligence gathered from captured communications suggested that the Zephyrians were developing new biological weapons there, possibly intended for use against other species they planned to eliminate. Captain Alex Turner commanded the strike team that would assault the station. He was no longer the young ensign who had fled Earth's destruction. 2 decades of living in hidden bases had transformed him into one of humanity's most effective special operations leaders. His team consisted of volunteers who had all lost family members to Zephyrian weapons. "We go in fast and hard," Alex explained to his team as they prepared for the mission. "Plant the charges, grab whatever data we can, and get out before they know we were there. Remember, we're not just fighting for revenge anymore. We're fighting for the future of every species in this galaxy." Dr. Nina Ford watched the mission, briefing from her laboratory on Europa. She had become humanity's leading expert on alien biology, but her work had taken a dark turn. Instead of studying life to preserve it, she was learning how to destroy it more efficiently. The cheerful young scientist was gone, replaced by someone who understood that survival sometimes required terrible choices. Her latest breakthrough was immunity to Zephyrian biological weapons. Through careful genetic manipulation, she had developed treatments that would allow humans to survive exposure to the same viruses that had killed billions of their people. But the treatment came with side effects that made the subjects stronger, faster, and more resistant to environmental damage than normal humans. "The first generation of enhanced volunteers is ready," she reported during the weekly command conference. "They can survive in vacuum for short periods, process toxins that would kill normal humans, and heal from injuries that would be fatal to our ancestors." Captain Carl Davis had spent 20 years building a network of hidden supply bases and communication relays throughout human space. His civilian fleet had become a lifeline for scattered survivor groups, carrying supplies, weapons, and information between isolated communities. He was older now, his hair gray and his face lined with the stress of constant danger. "We've made contact with survivors from 3 other species," he announced. "The Corvani resistance movement has been hiding in the Galactic Rim for 50 years. The Altarian refugees have been living in generation ships, moving constantly to avoid detection. And we found evidence that some Nexari survived their supposed extinction." This was the most important development in years. Humanity was no longer alone in their fight against the Zephyrians. Other species had survived the attempted genocide and were willing to work together against their common enemy. The alliance began slowly, with careful exchanges of information and technology. The Corvani had developed advanced energy weapons. During their long resistance campaign, the Altarians possessed powerful shield technology that could protect ships from Zephyrian attacks. The Nexari brought knowledge of Zephyrian psychology and culture that helped the Allies understand their enemies' weaknesses. Lieutenant Colonel Kate Murphy coordinated intelligence operations from her base on Pluto. She had intercepted thousands of Zephyrian communications over the years, slowly building a complete picture of their civilization. What she had learned was both encouraging and terrifying. "They're not as united as they appear," she explained to the Alliance leadership. "The Zephyrian collective is actually made up of dozens of different subspecies, each with their own agendas. Some want to continue the extermination campaigns. Others think they should focus on building defenses against whatever they're running from. More importantly, Kate had discovered that the Zephyrians were facing internal problems. Their rapid expansion across the galaxy was straining their resources. Several colony worlds had experienced rebellions by enslaved populations, and there were reports of strange attacks on Zephyrian outposts in the galactic core, suggesting that whatever they were fleeing from was catching up. Dr. Susan Wright had established a secret research facility in the Kuiper Belt, where she worked on humanity's most ambitious project. Using genetic samples preserved from before the war, she was developing ways to rebuild human civilization with improvements learned from 20 years of survival. "We can't just go back to what we were," she explained to the other survivors. "The humans who lived before the war were too trusting, too peaceful. They couldn't protect themselves when real danger appeared. We need to create something better." Her research focused on genetic modifications that would make future humans more adaptable, more resilient, and more capable of defending themselves. But she was careful to preserve what made humans special: their creativity, their compassion for each other, and their determination to survive against impossible odds. The underground war was changing all of them. Children born in the hidden. Bases grew up learning to fight before they could read. Engineers developed weapons instead of peaceful technologies. Scientists studied death instead of life. But they also learned cooperation on a scale their ancestors had never achieved. Every human survivor knew that their species' future depended on working together. As the 20th anniversary of the Great Dying approached, humanity's survivors were no longer the desperate refugees who had fled their burning worlds. They had become something new, something dangerous. The Zephyrians had tried to eliminate humanity because they feared what humans might become. They were about to discover that their worst fears had been far too optimistic. The hidden war was about to become something much more visible and much more terrifying for those who had started it. Colonel Mike Ross stood in the center of the training facility, watching his enhanced soldiers practice combat maneuvers in the vacuum of space. They moved without suits, their modified bodies able to survive in the cold emptiness between stars, for hours at a time. These were no longer the humans who had once farmed peaceful colonies across the galaxy. "How long can they operate in vacuum now?" asked Dr. Laura Price, watching the soldiers through the observation window. She was humanity's leading expert on the psychological modifications that came with genetic enhancement. 6 hours minimum, Mike replied, pride evident in his voice. "And they can survive direct exposure to most Zephyrian energy weapons for several minutes, long enough to close with the enemy and eliminate them." The soldiers moved like predators, using magnetic grapples to pull themselves between asteroids with impossible grace. Their eyes had been modified to see across a broader spectrum, allowing them to spot Zephyrian stealth technology. Their bones were reinforced with alien metals, making them nearly unbreakable. Their nervous systems had been enhanced to process information and react to threats faster than any normal human could manage. Dr. Laura Price had developed these modifications through careful study of captured Zephyrian neural technology. But the process had changed her as well. Exposure to alien thought patterns had given her abilities that no human was supposed to possess. She could sense the emotions and intentions of people around her, and sometimes she could influence their thoughts in subtle ways. "The psychological profiles are interesting," she reported to the command staff. "The enhanced soldiers show decreased empathy toward non-humans, but increased loyalty to other humans. They're becoming a warrior caste, designed specifically to protect our species." Sergeant Tony Blake was one of the first generation of enhanced soldiers. He had volunteered for the program after his family was killed in a Zephyrian raid on the asteroid mining station where they lived. The modifications had taken 6 months to complete, during which his body was rebuilt from the cellular level up. "I don't feel human anymore," he confided to his fellow soldier Rachel Stone as they prepared for their next mission. "But I don't care. What I am now can kill Zephyrians with my bare hands. That's worth any price." Rachel nodded, understanding completely. She had been a civilian engineer before the enhancement program, but the loss of her home colony had motivated her to volunteer for military modifications. Her new body could interface directly with computer systems, allowing her to control multiple weapons or ships simultaneously. The enhancement program was just one part of humanity's transformation. Admiral Carl Davis, now the Supreme Commander of the Human Resistance, had overseen the construction of a new generation of warships that incorporated technology stolen from dozens of different alien species. The Retribution was the flagship of this new fleet, a massive vessel that dwarfed anything humanity had built before the war. Its hull was made from materials that could regenerate damage automatically. Its weapons could fire rounds that phased through shields or energy beams that could cut through entire enemy fleets. Admiral Susan Wright commanded the ship's research division, where teams of scientists worked around the clock to develop new weapons and defenses. She had changed as much as anyone else, her peaceful scientific curiosity replaced by a cold determination to give humanity every possible advantage in the coming war. "We're not trying to match Zephyrian technology anymore," she explained to a gathering of resistance leaders. "We're surpassing it. Every piece of equipment they've ever used, we've found ways to make it better, deadlier, more efficient." Captain Jake Ross, son of the original enhanced soldier Mike Ross, represented the second generation of modified humans. Born and raised in the hidden bases, he had never known a world without war. His modifications were even more extreme than his father's generation, allowing him to pilot fighters that moved faster than anything the Zephyrians could track. "The new phase fighters can slip through normal space-time," he reported after a successful test flight. "We can attack enemy ships from angles that shouldn't exist, then disappear before they can respond." The Resistance had also learned to recruit from other species. Agent Lisa Park had become humanity's chief negotiator with alien resistance groups. She had been modified with Zephyrian diplomatic implants, allowing her to understand and manipulate the psychology of dozens of different species. "The Corvani want to join our next major offensive," she reported. "They're willing to contribute their energy weapon technology and their knowledge of Zephyrian military tactics. The Altarians are more cautious, but they'll provide defensive support if we can guarantee the safety of their generation ships." But the most significant change was in humanity's overall philosophy. The peaceful explorers who had once sought friendship among the stars were gone forever. In their place was a species that viewed the galaxy as a battlefield where only the strongest would survive. General Dan Foster commanded the ground assault forces that would spearhead the invasion of Zephyrian territory. His soldiers were equipped with armor that could adapt to any environment and weapons that could penetrate any known defense. But more importantly, they had been trained to think like apex predators. "We're not fighting to reclaim our old colonies," he explained to his troops before their first major offensive. "We're fighting to remake the galaxy according to human principles. Any species that threatens us will be eliminated. Any species that serves us will be protected. Any species that ignores us will be left alone until we decide otherwise." The transformation wasn't just physical or technological. Humanity's culture had changed as well. Children learned mathematics by calculating orbital bombardment patterns. Artists created beautiful works that depicted the destruction of enemy worlds. Musicians composed symphonies that incorporated the sounds of alien screams. Dr. Nina Cross, formerly Nina Ford, had established schools in the hidden bases where children learned history, science, and warfare simultaneously. The curriculum focused on practical skills needed for survival and conquest, but it also preserved the knowledge and achievements of pre-war human civilization. "We remember what we were," she told her students, "so we can appreciate what we've become. Our ancestors were peaceful because they didn't understand the universe's true nature. We know better. We know that peace is a luxury that only the strong can afford." The enhanced humans began to see themselves as a new species entirely. They called themselves the New Terrans, to distinguish themselves from the weak humans who had been nearly exterminated by alien treachery. They viewed their modifications not as mutations, but as evolution, the natural development of humanity's potential when faced with an existential threat. As the resistance prepared for its transition, from hidden guerrilla warfare to open conquest, the leaders gathered one final time to review their plans. They were no longer the desperate survivors who had fled burning worlds 25 years earlier. They had become something that the galaxy had never seen before, a species that had been pushed to the edge of extinction and had chosen to become monsters rather than victims. Admiral Carl Davis looked around the conference table at faces that barely resembled the humans he had once known. Enhanced soldiers with glowing eyes, scientists whose minds had been expanded beyond normal human limits, engineers who could interface directly with alien technology, and commanders who thought in terms of galactic conquest rather than simple survival. The Zephyrians wanted to eliminate humanity because they were afraid of what we might become, he said quietly. They were right to be afraid. What we've become is their worst nightmare made real. The Zephyrian High Command received the first reports of human activity with mild annoyance rather than concern. After 25 years of silence from the supposedly extinct species, a few cargo ships had gone missing in the Outer Rim territories. It seemed like nothing more than space pirates or equipment failures. High Commander Zethric, the same being who had negotiated humanity's downfall decades earlier, reviewed the reports in his crystalline office on the Zephyrian homeworld. His silver eyes reflected the holographic displays showing missing ships and abandoned outposts. "Increase patrol frequency in the affected sectors," he ordered his subordinate, Sub-Commander Velthak. "It's probably just scavengers picking through the ruins of the human colonies." Velthak's crystalline features showed uncertainty. "Sir, the missing ships were heavily armed cargo vessels with full military escorts, and the survivors found at the abandoned outposts show signs of weapons we don't recognize." Zethric waved a dismissive hand. "Impossible. We eliminated the human species completely. Their technology was primitive compared to ours. Whatever is happening out there, it can't be humans. But across Zephyrian space, the attacks were escalating rapidly. Admiral Susan Wright's fleet had emerged from their hidden bases with technology that made Zephyrian defenses look ancient. The massive dreadnought Retribution led a strike force of 50 ships toward the Zephyrian military outpost at Kepler Station. Captain Jake Ross piloted his advanced fighter through the enemy's defensive perimeter, his modified senses allowing him to see the energy patterns of their shields and weapons. His ship could phase through normal space-time, appearing inside the Zephyrian formation before their sensors could track him. "Multiple targets acquired," he reported to Admiral Wright over the communication system. "Beginning attack run." His weapons fired rounds that existed in several dimensions simultaneously, making it impossible for Zephyrian shields to stop them. Entire enemy ships exploded as the exotic ammunition tore through their hulls like paper. Within minutes, Jake had destroyed 6 vessels before they could even return fire. The main human fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly on top of the station, their own shields shimmering with captured alien technology. The Retribution fired its primary weapon, a beam of concentrated energy that could cut through planetary surfaces. The Zephyrian station simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that not even debris remained. "All targets eliminated," reported Admiral Wright to her command staff. "No survivors detected. Prepare to move to the next target." But this wasn't just military conquest. The humans had learned something terrible during their years of hiding. Agent Lisa Park led special operations teams that infiltrated Zephyrian civilian populations, using their enhanced abilities to blend in perfectly with alien society. She could alter her appearance at will, thanks to technology stolen from a dozen different species. Her mind could process Zephyrian thoughts and memories, allowing her to impersonate their people so perfectly that even close family members couldn't tell the difference. "The intelligence gathered from Target 7 is complete," she reported from her hiding place on a Zephyrian colony world. "I've identified their communication networks, supply lines, and civilian leadership. Ready to begin. Phase 2. Phase 2 involved the systematic elimination of Zephyrian infrastructure, not through bombing or direct assault, but through infiltration and sabotage. Lisa and her team poisoned water supplies with toxins that were harmless to other species, but deadly to Zephyrians. They reprogrammed automated systems to malfunction at critical moments. They assassinated key leaders and replaced them with agents who looked identical but followed human orders. General Dan Foster's ground forces represented the most terrifying aspect of humanity's transformation. His enhanced soldiers could survive in any environment and adapt to any threat. They moved through Zephyrian territory like a plague, leaving empty cities and lifeless worlds in their wake. "Resistance is minimal," he reported after the conquest of the industrial world, Zephyr Prime. "The enemy can't understand how we operate. Their weapons can't penetrate our armor. Their defenses can't track our movements, and their biology can't survive our weapons." The enhanced soldiers had been modified to process any type of atmosphere and survive exposure to any known toxin. They could see in total darkness, hear across vast distances, and move faster than Zephyrian reflexes could. Follow. But most importantly, they felt no mercy for the species that had tried to exterminate their own. Dr. Laura Price had developed psychological weapons that attacked the Zephyrian mind directly. Using technology based on their own neural implants, she could broadcast thoughts and emotions that drove entire populations to madness. Zephyrian cities would suddenly erupt in violence as their people turned against each other, driven by artificially induced paranoia and rage. "The beauty of psychological warfare," she explained to her research team, "is that the victims destroy themselves. We don't even need to fire a shot." The Zephyrians began to realize they were facing something beyond their understanding. Admiral Kelthrin commanded the largest fleet in Zephyrian space, thousands of ships that should have been able to stop any threat, but when he encountered the human fleet near the Vega system, his forces were systematically annihilated. "They're using weapons that shouldn't exist," he reported desperately to High Command before his flagship was destroyed. "Their ships can appear and disappear at will. Their soldiers can survive in open space, and their commanders seem to know our tactics before we even deploy them." High Commander Zethric finally began to understand the magnitude of the threat. when entire star systems started going silent. The humans weren't just attacking military targets, they were eliminating every trace of Zephyrian civilization from conquered territories. Engineer Beth Cross had developed orbital platforms that could sterilize planets from light years away. The platforms fired quantum weapons that attacked matter at the subatomic level, making it impossible for Zephyrian technology to defend against them. Worlds that had housed billions of Zephyrians simply turned into dead rocks floating in space. "We need to evacuate the core systems," Zethric announced to the panicking High Council. "Whatever these humans have become, they're more dangerous than anything we've ever encountered." But evacuation was impossible. Captain Carl Davis had anticipated Zephyrian retreat plans and positioned human fleets at every possible escape route. The space-folding technology humans had developed made it possible to travel vast distances instantly, allowing them to be everywhere at once. Dr. Nina Cross had established research facilities throughout conquered Zephyrian territory, where teams of scientists studied their enemies like laboratory specimens. They learned everything about Zephyrian biology, psychology, and culture, not to understand them, but to find better ways to destroy them. "They're terrified," she reported with satisfaction. "Their entire civilization is built on the assumption that they're the apex predators of the galaxy. They've never faced anything that could hunt them in return." The psychological impact on Zephyrian society was devastating. They had spent thousands of years believing they were superior to other species, eliminating any potential threats before they could develop. Now they found themselves being hunted by prey that had become predators beyond their worst nightmares. Colonel Mike Ross led the assault on the Zephyrian Military Academy, where their best soldiers were trained. His enhanced troops moved through the facility like death itself, eliminating instructors and students with equal efficiency. But they left one survivor, a young cadet who would carry the message back to his people. "Tell them," Mike said to the terrified alien, "that this is what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. We don't just survive, we evolve. And now we're coming for every last one of you." As the human campaign of extermination continued, the Zephyrians began to understand that they had created something far worse than they had ever imagined. In trying to eliminate humanity before it could become a threat, they had forced it to become the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever known. The Zephyrian homeworld had never seen an enemy fleet in its skies. For thousands of years, it had been the center of a vast empire that stretched across multiple galaxies. Now, 10,000 human ships hung in orbit like dark angels of judgment, their weapons trained on the cities below. President Anna Scott stood on the bridge of the command ship Nemesis, looking down at the blue world that had birthed humanity's destroyers. She had been elected by the survivors after President Hayes died in the final evacuation of Earth. Under her leadership, humanity had transformed from refugees into the galaxy's most feared species. High Commander Zethric is requesting permission to speak with our leadership, reported Communications Officer Tony Blake. The enhanced soldier's voice carried no emotion as he delivered the message. 25 years of war had burned away any sympathy he might have felt for their enemies. Anna nodded slowly. "Put him through. Let's hear what our old friend has to say." The main screen flickered, showing the familiar crystalline features of the Zephyrian who had orchestrated humanity's near extinction. But Zethric looked different now. Older, more fragile, his silver eyes dulled with fear and desperation. "President Scott," he began, his melodic voice now trembling with barely controlled panic. We wish to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution to this conflict? Anna smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. The human leaders had learned to smile the way predators showed their teeth. Peace? You mean the kind of peace you offered my species 30 years ago? The peace of extinction? That was different, Zethric protested. We believed humans posed a potential threat to galactic stability. We were protecting civilization itself. And now? Anna asked calmly. Do you still believe we're a threat to galactic stability? The silence stretched for long moments before Zethric responded. You've become something we never imagined possible. Your species has evolved beyond our ability to predict or control. We admit our error. Behind Anna, Admiral Tony Blake monitored the orbital platforms that surrounded the Zephyrian homeworld. Each platform carried weapons capable of sterilizing entire continents from space. The technology was based on principles stolen from a dozen different alien species, but refined and improved by human engineers who understood destruction in ways their enemies never could. Sir, he reported quietly, long-range sensors are detecting Zephyrian evacuation ships attempting to flee from the far side of the planet. Should we intercept? Anna shook her head. Let them run. There's nowhere in this galaxy they can hide from us now. Dr. Nina Cross had established monitoring stations throughout Zephyrian space that could track any ship, any communication, any sign of alien activity. Humanity's intelligence network was so comprehensive that they knew about Zephyrian movements before the aliens made their decisions. On the planet's surface, General Dan Foster's enhanced soldiers had taken control of major cities without firing a shot. They simply appeared in the streets, their modified forms radiating an aura of unstoppable power that made resistance seem pointless. Zephyrian civilians huddled in their homes, afraid to venture outside. The population centers are secure, Dan reported. No hostile action detected. They're too scared to fight back. President Anna Scott had spent months planning this moment. The ultimatum she was about to deliver had been carefully crafted to ensure that the Zephyrians understood the full scope of their situation. High Commander Zethric, she said, her voice carrying across space to the trembling alien leader. I'm going to give you the same choice you gave humanity 30 years ago. Extinction or surrender? What do you mean by surrender? Zethric asked, though his tone suggested he already feared the answer. Complete submission to human authority, Anna replied. Your people will become a client species under our protection. Your military will be disbanded. Your weapons will be confiscated. Your government will be replaced by human administrators, and your biology will be modified to ensure future compliance. Dr. Laura Price had developed the modification process during humanity's long war of revenge. Using techniques learned from studying Zephyrian neural technology, she could alter an alien's brain chemistry to remove aggressive instincts and increase obedience to human authority. You're talking about enslaving our entire species, Zethric whispered, his crystalline features reflecting the horror of his realization. I'm talking about survival, Anna corrected. The same survival you offered my people. The only difference is that we're more generous than you were. We're allowing you to live. Captain Jake Ross commanded the fighter squadrons that patrolled Zephyrian space, ensuring that no alien vessel could escape human attention. His pilots had been born and raised during the war years, knowing nothing but conflict and conquest. To them, the Zephyrians were simply obstacles to be removed. All escape routes are blocked, he reported. Every Zephyrian ship in the system is under our control. They have no choice but to accept whatever terms we offer. But the ultimatum wasn't just about the Zephyrians. Admiral Carl Davis had positioned human fleets throughout the galaxy, surrounding the homeworlds of every species that had failed to resist Zephyrian expansion. The message was clear: submit to human authority or face the same fate as the aliens who had tried to exterminate humanity. Agent Lisa Park had infiltrated the governments of dozens of species using her enhanced abilities to gather intelligence and manipulate political decisions. Most alien civilizations were choosing to ally themselves with humanity rather than risk destruction. The Corvani have formally requested human protection, she reported. The Altarians are offering to share their shield technology in exchange for guaranteed autonomy, and 3 other species have volunteered to serve as human auxiliaries. Engineer Beth Cross monitored the quantum weapons platforms that could destroy entire star systems if necessary. The technology represented the ultimate expression of humanity's transformation from peaceful explorers to galactic overlords. No species in the galaxy possessed defenses that could stop such weapons. All weapon systems are online and ready, she announced. We can sterilize any world that refuses to accept human authority within minutes of receiving the order. High Commander. Zethric looked around his command center at the faces of his fellow Zephyrians. They had been the galaxy's apex predators for millennia, eliminating potential threats before they could develop. Now they faced a species that had evolved beyond their ability to comprehend or resist. We accept your terms, he said finally, his voice barely audible. The Zephyrian Collective surrenders to human authority. President Anna Scott nodded, feeling a satisfaction that went beyond mere victory. This wasn't just conquest. It was justice. The species that had tried to exterminate humanity would now serve as an example to any other aliens who might consider humans weak or vulnerable. Wise choice, she said. Dr. Cross will begin the biological modification process immediately. Your people will be relocated to designated reservation worlds where they can live peaceful, productive lives under human supervision. Dr. Nina Cross had prepared facilities throughout former Zephyrian space where the aliens would be processed and modified. The procedures were designed to preserve their useful characteristics while removing their capacity for violence or rebellion. Within a generation, the Zephyrians would become a docile species that existed solely to serve human interests. As the surrender negotiations concluded, President Scott turned to address her command staff. These were no longer the humans who had once sought peaceful coexistence with alien species. They had become something new, a species that had stared into the abyss of extinction and chosen to become the abyss themselves. Send word to all human fleets, she ordered. The Zephyrian threat has been neutralized. Begin implementation of the Galactic Authority protocols. Any species that refuses to acknowledge human supremacy will be classified as a potential threat and dealt with accordingly. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be the same.